I would, if I had to guess, Joy, and it is a guess because we don't have right now we don't have the gift of being with each of those individual ladies, those amazingly successful people. If I had to
Mm,
guess, if I think that there would have to be something in their
mm,
past. Maybe it's current that while
mm,
they have this representation of dollars and cents in the bank,
yeah.
something's missing. Or I look, Joy, at in all the work that I do, the prevalence of trauma in people's
Mm,
lives. And I think what happens is a friend of mine said this recently. He and I stopped him when he said it because I'm like, oh my gosh, that's an amazing statement. He says, trauma doesn't know time. So
mm,
I said, Ryan, do you realize what you just said? That's so true. So
wow.
if at least some, let's say there's five of these amazingly successful ladies, these women, I'm
Mm,
sorry, ladies sounds disrespectful. These women, I would have to think two or three, most likely, if they've reached that point of financial success and yet they still feel like there's a void, trauma, they have experienced some form of trauma, whatever it is. And it's important to note, Joy, that people we don't give ourselves enough grace in
mm,
realizing trauma can be doesn't have to just be sexual assault or financial devastation or a natural disaster or a health issue. It could be so many different things. It could be growing up in a home where you were the youngest child of six and you were ignored because by the time that you came along, your parents were tired of having kids and maybe they never abused you, but they ignored
yeah.
you. And so it could be so many different things.
This is Joy Roland, and you are listening to the Joyful Money Podcast. This is episode number 93. Mental health is key to creating wealth with David Woods Bartley. Welcome to Joyful Money, the podcast where we focus on making money the joyful way. We are done with the stress and anxiety that typically come with making money. We'll feature extraordinary and inspiring business owners who are making a huge impact by sharing their gifts and talents with the world. Pour yourself a cup of coffee or tea and let's go. Hello, everybody, and welcome to another exciting episode of the podcast. I am thrilled, I'm joyful, I'm excited because I have a very special guest. His name is David Bartley. Welcome to the show, David.
Joy, thank you so much for allowing me to be. I feel like you've let me come into your family. So I feel very, very blessed. Thank you.
Yes, yes, this is definitely my family, and you are very welcome. Why don't you start, David, by introducing yourself and telling us what you do?
So right now, what I do is I share my journey. And my journey, Joy, is the journey from mental hellness to mental wellness. And I travel around the United States and albeit the world. And I talk about the importance, as you said, the importance of mental health, but also to giving because I still battle this thing called depression, and I'm 61 years old, and I have battled it for really 50 years, and so I'm out there. I'm a storyteller, so I don't use statistics and I don't use PowerPoints and things like that. I tell a variety of stories to help people better understand the malady that I deal with and battle and have successfully have overcome at times so that they can have a better idea maybe of what they're dealing with, but also maybe their brother, their sister, their husband, their wife, or anything else, because ultimately the better we are feeling, especially in terms of our mental health, per what you said at the beginning of the podcast, the more access to wealth of every type that we have.
Wow. This is a topic that's very close to my heart because, like you said, many people have experience with mental health issues, depression, anxiety, maybe not personally, but with maybe a family member, a friend. So I can so relate to this topic, and I'm so happy and excited that we are talking about this today. The reason I'm excited is because in my work, I come across women who maybe kind of falsely thought that if they would create massive amounts of wealth, it would give them the happiness they're looking for. And so they
Mm,
get to that stage where they have all their needs met, they have all the wealth, they have all the trappings of life, and they are still not fulfilled. And they ask the question, what next? What am I doing here? How did I get here? Why am I not happy? I have the five-bedroom house, I have the picket fence, I have the kids, I have the job, I have the career. Why am I not happy? So in your experience as a speaker, a trainer, and a presenter, can you give us some insights, your personal insights,
mm.
as to why this is the case?
I would, if I had to guess, Joy, and it is a guess because we don't have right now with we don't have the gift of being with each of those individual ladies, those amazingly successful people. If I had to
Mm,
guess, if I think that there would have to be something in their
mm,
past. Maybe it's current that while
mm,
they have this representation of dollars and cents in the bank,
yeah.
something's missing. Or I look, Joy, at in all the work that I do, the prevalence of trauma in people's
Mm,
lives. And I think what happens is a friend of mine said this recently. I stopped him when he said it because I'm like, oh my gosh, that's an amazing statement. He says, trauma doesn't know time. So
mm,
I said, Ryan, do you realize what you just said? That's so true. So
wow.
if at least some, let's say there's five of these amazingly successful ladies, these women, I'm
Mm,
sorry, ladies sounds disrespectful. These women, I would have to think two or three, most likely, if they've reached that point of financial success and yet they still feel like there's a void, trauma, they have experienced some form of trauma, whatever it is. And it's important to note, Joy, that people we don't give ourselves enough grace in
mm,
realizing trauma can be doesn't have to just be sexual assault or financial devastation or a natural disaster or a health issue. It could be so many different things. It could be growing up in a home where you were the youngest child of six and you were ignored because by the time that you came along, your parents were tired of having kids and maybe they never abused you, but they ignored
yeah.
you. And so it could be so many different things. And I think trauma, if I have to pick a culprit,
Mm,
in mental illness, and I'm using that word in the broadest sense, not like you're going to be hospitalized in an inpatient psych unit, just saying that your mental state may not be well. That's okay. If you look at the impact of trauma, and I want to give you a definition and a quote to put it in perspective of how powerful this is. So in the
mm,
dictionary, trauma is defined as severe and lasting emotional shock and pain caused by an extremely upsetting experience. So let me say that one more
mm,
time. Severe and lasting emotional shock and pain caused by a significantly upsetting experience. Didn't say you have to be raped. Didn't say
mm,
you had to lose a limb. Didn't say that your child ended their life by suicide, which of course are all horrific situations. But I think we don't give ourselves enough grace to realize, like, yeah, you know what? I have experienced trauma. And then there's a quote by a woman named Jane Levy. And this quote, it's just like my friend Ryan's, in which he says, trauma doesn't know time. Jane Levy says this: trauma fractures comprehension like a pebble shatters a windshield. The wound
mm,
at the site of impact spreads across the field of vision, obscuring reality and challenging belief.
mm,
Oh, because we all know what it's like to be in a car and something hits the windshield. Oh, and then what happens if the initial impact, maybe it's small, we think, oh, but what happens if we don't attend to that? It
mm.
always spreads out. It never
Yeah.
just stays contained to that small little whatever impact on the windshield. It all, if we don't attend to it. So I think it's one for these amazing souls to recognize something in their past or something in their present is keeping them away. It's like a fence to their true happiness because they have that
Mm.
that sense that they've been traumatized. They have post traumatic stress. They do. So that would be my very long-winded, excuse me, answer to the question.
Yeah, I love that. I really love that. So then, for example, I personally I've dealt with depression, postpartum depression that spiraled into clinical depression, and I
Mm,
was almost put on antidepressants, which I refused because of the impact I had seen antidepressants have on my husband at the time. So I didn't want to have to go through all of those side effects. And recently, I've been asking myself, obviously, like most people, I've experienced trauma growing up. Um, and so I keep asking myself, why can't I let go? But what you just said, that trauma doesn't know time. Because
mm.
in my head, I'm like, it's over 30, maybe about over 30 years ago, I've experienced all of this. Why can't I move past just the thought of the pain and everything I've gone through? Why can't I just let go? It's over 30 years ago. I should be able to move on, right? So I like how you said trauma doesn't know time. So in your experience, how would you um, kind of guide people to find that path to happiness?
I think, I have, so to give a little context, so I inherited the genetic predisposition, not the guarantee, the predisposition for clinical depression from my beloved father. But my three older brothers, who I adore, they have no hint of depression at all. So the question becomes
Mm,
then, what happened to me? Trauma. So at 12, unfortunately, I was raped by a Boy Scout leader. And that started that whole thing.
yeah.
So when I tell people now at 61 years old, I mean, I know how long I have fought this thing to do. So
Mm,
for me, it has been in this continued journey, and it is definitely joy. It has definitely been like this. There I didn't want it to be like that. It's been like this of
yeah.
hellness to wellness. I'm at a place of mental health at the likes of which I never knew possible. I mean, I've hit some really good high points before, but and I'll circle back at one point to share what's helped me this additional component of self care. But now I see the world in a very different way, which is amazing. This has all been for me. There is no way I'm having this incredibly sacred conversation with you without professional help. And so, to answer your
Mm,
question, the short version of the answer is counseling. It I mean, I have spent a great deal of time in counseling, and maybe don't see. I think maybe when you say, "Hey, I'm going to see a therapist or a counselor," you're like, "Oh, what's wrong? You've lost your mind or everything else." However, but just think, okay, if we say, let's say we're going to the same person, and we say, "Hey, I'm going. I have an appointment with my coach." Oh, wow, that's cool. You're going to see your coach? Yeah,
yeah.
totally different. It's the same person. Call it a coach because they do the
Yeah.
same thing. They're
Yes.
there to help you become. They're helped to process and let go of trauma, to learn new skills, to give you new tools. A therapist and a coach are the same thing. Call it
Mm,
all. Don't get hung up on the word. That's why I like people to expand the realization of how trauma is most likely the thing that is keeping you from being as truly as happy as you deserve to be, as wealthy in all parts of your life, body, mind,
yeah.
spirit, and physically. So how can you process that trauma? I don't think you can process it by yourself. I don't.
Mm,
I don't. And I personally don't feel a need to try to process it by myself. Now, I mean, I'm given homework. All coaches give us homework,
yes.
like, hey, okay, next week, David, go do this, 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 this. Okay, thanks, coach, or thanks, therapist, thanks, doctor, whatever you want to say. So I think, and I mean, the people, Joy, that I have in my life to support me are just amazing,
Mm,
incredible. There's no way I'm here having this time with you without the people in my life. It's impossible. It doesn't happen.
wow, this is so profound. So then, like, how do we how do family members support
Mm.
family members who are going through this? Like, I asked this because I did a very terrible job, and I have to apologize to my husband because he was battling all of these things, and he opened up to me one day and he said, "Oh, I always have thoughts of going in front of a train when a train
Mm,
is coming."
mm,
And he said, we were in the house, and he said, something keeps telling me to go up um to the balcony and jump off, right?
mm,
And my I was angry when he said that. And I told him, well, why don't you go to the penthouse, go to the highest point and jump, so that when you jump, you make sure you die and you end it for real. I was angry because I was like, why would you entertain such thoughts? Right? So that response I gave him, I still beat myself up to about it today, because I felt like I allowed my fear of him leaving me, my fear of him
mm.
dying, to overcome the support he needed at that time. Right? So how do family members support their people?
So, one, thank you for sharing that. May I ask when that was?
Oh, this must have been about 6 years ago.
And may I ask, have you ever apologized to your beloved?
Not directly, but he
Okay,
listens to this podcast, and I hope.
let's just start. So I don't. I laugh just in the joy of being connected with you. That's not. I'm not being disrespectful. So I think I get this question a lot, and I love this question, and the answer is really simple. So you come, yeah, I come to you and I say, Joy, I'm thinking of killing myself, or Joy, I'm really really sad, or whatever I am to share with you, and and I share, and you listen, and I say to folks, resist the temptation, even if you have some really really good ideas, resist the temptation to offer any advice. Don't offer any advice. There's a quote that says, because I'm crazy about quotes, our listening creates a sanctuary for the homeless parts in another person. And it's just that whole aspect of being able to share. And so then the question becomes, okay, David, how do I best support my beloved who said he wants to go up to the balcony to jump off? And my reply would be is ask him. You say, sweetheart, I'm so incredibly sorry that you're suffering. I love that word. When you acknowledge my suffering, because
Mm,
you get it, it's because there's another quote that says to not have your suffering recognized is an almost unspeakable form of violence. So you just think
mm,
about so you say, sweetheart, I'm so incredibly sorry you're suffering. So now I know how I feel. That's huge. That in and of itself does so much good. I mean, that's like money in the bank right there. So you say, sweetheart, I'm so incredibly sorry that you're suffering. And then this is the next part. What can I do to support you?
mm,
And then you listen. Because they may say, and the beauty, and this is what I was taught. I'd love to say these are my original ideas, but they're not. These, because he may say something like, oh, hey, you know what? Let's go get a vanilla milkshake. Okay, great. I wouldn't have thought of that. The other thing, and I literally just learned this today,
mm,
speaking with who has now become a dear friend of mine. I always thought, so in the United States, and I don't know what it is in the amazing country known as Canada. It used to be for us when you were in trouble, you call 911. Now we have for suicide, it's 988. So
mm,
if I'm struggling, I call and say, hey, I'm having terrible thoughts, whatever it is. But this beautiful soul who I'm now closely connected to, he said, David, realize 988 is not just for people who are suffering themselves or in a dangerous place. It's for people who want to help that person to call the number to get ideas on how to support. And I'm like, I literally said, shut up. That's incredible. So
mm,
there's two ways. One, ask the person, because you are going to be, we, not you, we are going to be surprised at the simplicity of what they need. It is just, and let me give you a personal example. And it's not about me. There's nothing special about me. I'm a product of the people in my life. So I have
mm,
a dear friend, and I love this young man. There's just something about him. I just love him. So don't get very much time with him at all. And out of the blue, probably 2 months ago, his mom called me and said, "Hey, Levi is in a really bad place." I'm like, "Really?" I'm like, "Oh my gosh." She said, "Would you talk to him?" I said, "Of course I would talk to him." So we have a conversation. I said, "Brother, my God, what's going on?" And share, and he was just a whole bunch of different things. And all I did really was listen. And I said, try to think, okay, follow my own advice. I asked him, "What can I do to help you?" And he
Mm,
said, "Stay in touch." I said, "No problem." And he's a texter. He's younger than I am. So we just text back and forth. And a lot of times, Joy, in the beginning, I would text him and it would be like 2 days later that he would text back. And my texts are always short. Sometimes I get a, picture off the internet, but they always ended with "I love you." I said, "I love you very, very much." And just there were supportive things that people have said to me, I just said to him. So about a month ago, he, he sent me this text and he said, "Hey, I just want to
mm,
let you know I've turned a corner."
mm. Thank you, Jesus.
He said, "Hey, I just want to let you know I've turned a corner.
Mm,
Thanks for reminding me who I am."
yes. Mm, mm,
You just think all I did was just every few days send a text and tell him I loved him. And he said,
mm,
thanks for reminding me who I am. I'm teary because I just think to to to, to be able to play a role, a part,
mm,
to
mm,
share, to like, oh, and the simplicity of it and the power, and then how I got to feel. When you feel like, God, am I making any difference in the world?
mm.
For somebody to say, "Thanks for reminding me who I am."
Oh, yeah. Wow.
So I think and if I may, it's never too late to make amends. It's
Mm.
never too late to say to if I may, and if I'm overstepping my bounds, I
Oh, yeah, go
apologize.
ahead.
To just say, "Sweetheart, you know what? If I could change one thing, it would be how I would responded to your suffering. Would
Mm.
you please would you please forgive me?"
Yeah,
And just, it's
yeah,
yeah, yeah.
yeah, yeah. Thank you so much for that. Like, I sure needed to hear that, and I'll go back and re-listen to this episode when it publishes. So, how, like, someone is listening and they're like, how do I move on? So, for me personally, I I got to a state where I had the house, I had the car, all my needs are met. Like, I don't want for money. And so my work, the work I do now is now the fuel that keeps me going. Like,
Mm,
seeing the impact my work makes, that's what gets me excited to wake up in the morning. Right. And
mhm.
that's why I love the work I do. So then how would you tell someone, what would you tell someone to navigate this so that they have a life that fulfills them? Because at the end of the day, that's all we want. We want to live a life that we feel fulfilled by, want to live a life we're happy about. And the reason I'm so passionate about this is because I want my daughter to not have to go through what I've been through, because I know that sometimes the pain of trauma can be passed through to the next
Mm,
generation. And
mhm.
so I want you to stop here with me,
Right.
right? And so what encouraging words do you have for someone listening? They're like, okay, how do I move on? How do I create a life that fulfills me?
I think one, thank you for sharing.
Thanks.
I think the the key question to ask ourselves in moving forward is, what is happening in my life when I feel the best?
Mm,
And it could be whatever it is. Because I think, Joy, that from a spiritual perspective, God God doesn't expect us to that his will through us is to do something that we hate. Like, I don't think that, like, that doesn't, like, I've never met anybody who is like really in the flow. And I'm not talking about financially, but like from a sense of purpose. I've never met anybody that they hated what they were doing. And if you look at all those people, like you are making an enormous difference because you love what you do. You feel like you're whether you want to use, the God word or not, and I'm not here to preach. So I think it is to find out, well, what is that thing that, what's the purpose of my life? And I'd say, okay, well, what's going on when you feel the best?
Mm.
Okay, well, I'm with my family. Like, okay, well, let's break it down even more. What is it about? Like, be like really specific in when you're hanging with your family that you feel best. It just break it down because you want to go from a generality down to really, really specific because there's going to be something specific about you feeling your best when you're with your family. There's going to be something. It could be when I make them dinner. Like, okay, who knows? Maybe you want to go start a restaurant because you are really into this experience of feeding people, whatever it is. So I think Joy, that's the starting point. And I think quite honestly, that will never, and I don't like to use absolutes, that will never lead us astray. It won't.
Mm.
Because there's not going to be negativity, there's not going to be evil, there's not going to be anything bad that's happening when we feel our best. Just like those two things don't go together.
Yes, yes. Like this past weekend, like my daughter is always, she's 5. She's always saying, "Oh, I want to go to the beach." And we're so blessed. We live just by, well, not about 10 minutes drive to Lake Ontario, just the beach side.
Okay.
So we get to the beach and we go in the water. We just sit by the beach and allow the water to come all over us. And it was
Mm.
the most amazing experience, just being in front of this large body of water and just looking at how massive it is. And just watching my daughter basking in the water, like that was the most amazing experience I've ever had. So yeah, I love how you say we need to find what gives us the most joy because at the end of the day, it's not the money, right? When we get
Mm-mm.
to our deathbeds, we're not gonna say, "Oh, how I wish I made an extra $1 million," right? No, we're
No,
gonna say, "How I wish I spent more time with my family," because time is the only thing we don't have control over. I
so
love
so
this.
that
So, so tell us more about your work, David. What's your work like? How do you help people?
so it's really I love to do is to tell stories.
Mm,
And so I was just in Ohio last Wednesday, and then speaking at a resilience conference, and then I spoke to a group of soldiers on Friday in New Orleans. And the base talk that I share is called the why of suicide and the how of hope. My
mm,
belief, Joy, is that connection creates hope and hope saves lives. So I'm on a mission to offer not a better, just a different pathway to having people reconsider. I don't like the word prevention, having people reconsider taking their lives. And so in the first
mm,
half of the talk, it's all about the problem. And so I
mm,
answer four questions. So I answer, what happened? What happened that I was going to kill myself on August 31st, 2011? And then I share, what does it feel like? Like, what's it feel like to be under the weight of depression? Because people come to these talks because they really want to, like, I want to understand what it's like so I can better know how to respond. And
mm,
then I share, what does it take to be well? So I chart out a pathway and then offer, then what can we do in response to this thing called suicide? What can we do? So
mm,
that's the doing part is, so again, my theory, so I'm not a scientist. I have no initials past my name. I'm just a goofball, believe me. Connection creates hope and hope saves lives. So the first question becomes then, okay, dude, if we accept that, you got to break it down. What's connection? So
mm,
connection is Brene Brown. I define connection as the energy that exists between people when they feel seen, heard, and valued, when they can give and receive without judgment, and they derive strength and sustenance from the relationship. So this joy right now, for me, you have created the space where I feel seen, heard, and valued. This is connection right here.
Yeah.
And
Yes.
and how can anybody, when you feel seen, heard, and valued, you can give and receive without judgment, and you derive strength and sustenance, like you're
Mm.
empowered from the relationship? How can you feel anything but one emotion? Hope.
Hope.
It's impossible not to. You have no choice. So what is then the question becomes, okay, what is hope? Defined in the dictionary, the feeling that what is wanted can be had.
Mm.
The feeling that is wanted can be had. I'm like, oh my gosh. Okay, so I come to you, I'm suicidal. You, being you, beautiful, amazing joy, creates a space where I feel seen, heard, and valued. Then I feel hope. What is wanted can be had. Well, in the moment, what I want in that moment, when I come to you feeling suicidal, I want my emotional pain to end. Well, if I feel
Mm.
hopeful, by definition, it means that there is what is wanted can be had. I
Mm.
can have an end to my pain.
Yeah.
Then I'm safe. Like in
Mm.
that moment. So that means when people feel hopeful, they're safe. So then the
Yeah.
question becomes, okay, that makes sense. I mean, it's empirical. I'm not, look, I got a quote that you can't disagree with from Brene Brown, and I have a dictionary definition. Like, it's like scientific data. It's not
Mm.
touchy feely. Because my fear is people think, oh, hope, oh, yeah, yeah. No, 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 no. One, hope's a badass. But hope is just this, like this. And when you read, when I share the information, people are like, I can't argue with that. So then the question
Mm.
becomes, okay, well, how do you create connection? Three
Mm.
ways: recognition, understanding, and expression. And I'll do it real quick. The first thing I tell people is become great with remembering people's names. Remember their
Mm.
name. That's the most beautiful form of recognition in the world. And we all know what it's like when someone remembers our name and we have no expectation. They're like, oh my God, can't believe they remember my name. And
Mm.
when we do that, we're giving them respect. We're demonstrating very clearly that we're seeking to understand the truth of who they are. And really, we're honoring them. What a
Mm.
beautiful thing. I mean, I could come to you on a day that I'm feeling suicidal and you say, David, my God, it is so great to see you. Respect, understanding, truth, and honor by that simple act. But then next is understanding. We see stuff that we don't understand every day. And we will for the rest of our lives. And all I'm asking people to do, when you see it, and this is tough, and I'm going to ask you, Joy, my dear beloved friend, for the rest of your life, never again to ask the question why. Never. Ask the question what. It is a
Mm.
totally different question. There's a huge, because why is about justification. Why did you do that? You know what is? What's about sharing?
Mm.
What inspired you to do that? Totally different. Same
Mm.
situation, totally different question.
Mm.
Justification versus sharing. I mean, when we have to justify ourselves, I mean, of course we're like, but when you say what inspired you to do that, man, that's
Mm.
just like such a great question. It's incredible because again, it's all about sharing. It's about sharing. What
Well,
what compelled you to do that? What had you do that? Just no more why, no more why. Change out what. And the last is is about expression. We got to let people know how we feel. Well, they know I love them. Tell them again. They know I'm sorry. Tell them again. Just tell them again. And you can
mm.
do it a lot of different ways. But so I'm going to tell you an incredible story. So I told you about the trauma that happened to me in the Boy Scouts. So I work with the Army a lot. I love working with the Army. So I was working with a unit, and it was commanded by a Colonel Daniel Trouse. And I'd been with him and his troops for like 3 days, and we became really connected. So at the end of the last day, Joy, Colonel Trouse said, hey, David, come to my office, please. And I said, absolutely, sir. So I go to his office, and I go in, and he says, David, I cannot thank you enough for everything that you've taught my soldiers, everything you've taught
Mm.
me. You've given me a whole different perspective. But he said, David, I got to tell you, I'm so angry. And I'm like, oh no. And I'm like, oh no, I've overshared or I said something stupid. And he said, no, 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 David, I'm sorry. I'm not mad at you.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, sir, what's wrong? He said, David, I can't process what happened to you in the Boy Scouts. I can't accept it. I said,
Mm,
David, I can't. And he said, David, I was in the Boy Scouts. He said, David,
mm,
I became an Eagle Scout. And an Eagle
mm,
Scout is the highest that you can do. He said, David, everything that is good about me, I learned in the Boy Scouts as an Eagle Scout, as a father, as a colonel, as a commander, as a husband, as a human being. It's what I learned in the Boy Scouts, and what happened to you, I can't accept it. I
mm.
was like, wow.
Wow.
So then he took his hand and he pulled out his wallet and he pulled out, looked Joy like a credit card. And I'm like totally confused.
Hmm.
And then he turned and says, David, when you become an Eagle Scout, they give you one of these. And he turned it around and it was an Eagle Scout card. And he said, David, I got this card on November 3rd, 1998. He said, David, you go to any Eagle Scout, they have their card. Like it's symbolic of how important it is. And then Joy, he handed me the card and I held it and I looked at it and I was like, wow, it's incredibly meaningful how upset he was in regards.
Mm,
And I go to give the card back and he says, no, you keep it.
mm.
You've earned it.
Wow. Wow.
So I have the colonel's card. And I can't tell you, in fact, it happened just on this past Friday. At the end of the speech, there was a young company commander in New Orleans came up to me and showed me his Eagle Scout card. And he
Mm,
said, the fact that the colonel gave you his card. And you think about, Joy, what that amazing man, he just didn't know any other way to express himself, to try to take, he gave me part of him.
mm.
This is prevention.
Yes.
This to me is priceless.
Yeah.
I will always have this with me. So that's really what I teach. And I have a bunch of other talks and stuff, but mostly it's just wanting to share what other people have done to me, what other people have taught me.
Mm.
I tell a lot of different stories. Just it's the purpose of my life.
That's so beautiful. Thank you so much for sharing that. Like it's so beautiful to see how humans can connect with other humans because at that point he wanted to right the wrong, right? In his own
Yes,
way, right?
yes.
He
That's
wanted
so
to right
perfectly
the
said. Yes, yes, yes. Thank you.
yes. And when I was listening to you and I was thinking back as to why I cannot let go after over 30 years. And you graciously shared your story about the abuse you experienced in the Boy Scout. Very painful, right?
Mm,
For me, I feel like I'm still holding on to the pain because I want justice.
mm,
That's what's coming to my mind. I want justice. I feel like I shouldn't have been abused. I didn't deserve it. I was just a child, right? So is that sense of I want justice. I want these men to pay for what they've done. But it's not as easy as that. Like, how do I go find them? Maybe they are dead now. I don't know. So it's the work I need to do for myself to find freedom to say, well, that happened in the past. I can choose how I think about the past and then move on to the future. So when you were speaking, what just came to me was I want justice, right?
right.
I want
No.
them to pay for what they did, right?
So if I may, and it's so interesting, I literally just listened to it yesterday. Andrew Solomon has a TED talk that you are going to is going to mean the world to you because it talks
Mm,
about exactly what you're dealing with right now. So
mm.
I can give you the title of it. It's
Yes, please.
phenomenal. So it's Andrew Solomon, how the worst moments in our life, something to the effect, help create who
Okay.
we are. But if you just do Andrew Solomon and How the Worst Moments, it'll come right up. It's an
Okay.
incredible, I literally, Joy, just, and now I know why, so I could share it with you. I literally just listened to it yesterday and it was just like, oh my
Mm.
gosh, it's just
Mm.
so, I mean, it is, and it speaks exactly to what you and I, in terms of what happened to us so many years ago. And it was, I can't tell you how helpful it was to me yesterday, just to, and I've heard it many times, but I needed to hear it again yesterday.
Yeah. Can you
And
spell his last name, please?
Solomon, I'm gonna look it up really. I think it is Andrew Solomon.
Yeah.
Solomon.
Okay. Okay. Awesome.
Yeah, and it's how our work. If you just type say Andrew Solomon, how the worst moments, it'll come right up.
Okay. Awesome.
It is
Now,
so powerful.
okay. So listeners, I'm going to add the link to the show notes. I'm going to find it. I'm going to add the link to the show notes. Like, I can't believe what the time is. I'm just looking at my clock on the other computer. We are way over time, and I'm so happy we went over time because I needed this episode as much as my audience, right? So before I let you go, David, how do we get more people to speak up? I know like
Mm,
many people have experienced trauma, right? But not
yeah.
everyone is comfortable speaking up. But this trauma is eating people up. Mostly, I'll say all humans, but particularly men. How do we get men to see that speaking up and asking for help is not a sign of weakness? Because I feel like that's what's taking most of our fine men away from us, right?
Yeah.
To suicide and all of these evil things. So, how do we help men speak up more so that they can get the help and support they need?
And what I would suggest to my brothers out there who are suffering is imagine we've all had a heavy backpack on. You know what that's
Mm,
like? And we also know that, especially if we've had that pack on a long hike, we realize we remember how arduous it is, and the weight where we can no longer stand straight up because it's heavy. We also, on the other hand, know what it's like when we take it off. Like it's like, oh
mm,
my gosh, it feels incredible. What I can say to you, brothers, that it's the same thing when you share, when I share, when you share, when we share something traumatic. And here's, brothers, just if you set it up like this has been my experience that works best, that you find, and hopefully you have this person, at least one person in which you know you can share something, but make sure that you set it up like this, in which you say to the person, hey, I really need to share something with you. I don't need advice,
mm.
and I'm not looking for any kind of response. I need you, if you would just please listen to me. Is that okay? And they're going to say okay, and then
Mm,
you just share and
mm.
and leave it at that. But I can promise you, it will be like that heavy pack. You take it off, you're going to feel better, and it's
Yes.
going to be, because Maya Angelou has this incredible quote that says, "There's no greater agony than bearing the weight of an untold story."
Mm,
So now you tell the story, you let it go. That can be the first place. And then after that, I can't say enough about how professional counseling and support groups, if I had to choose between the two, if I could only do one or the other, I would do a group. And the reason is because you're, whatever that group is, and just Google depression support group, anxiety support group, whatever suicidal thought thinking support group, they're out there. When you're in a whole circle of people that have walked a similar path, and you tell your story and you look around the room and everybody's nodding their head in agreement because they totally get where you're coming from, man,
mm.
that is therapeutic to the max. Not that
Yeah.
individual is not great. All I'm saying is, if you had to choose, if I had to choose, I could only do one, I would do group. I would,
Yeah.
because it's just like the impact of it is multiplied. Just, and let's step back. Let's go back into the wealth mode. What are we talking? What are we? Some of our coaches say, hey, you should be part of a mastermind group. because then you have the community effect, the multiplied effect of everybody on the same page. It's the same sort of thing when you share trauma. You have you have all of this multiplied healing. At the end of group, then you give each other a big hug because you're like, oh my gosh, I feel so much better. So just a suggestion.
Yeah, that is so profound. And the reason I like this topic so much is because I know this podcast is about joyful money, making money, but there is no way you can live life to the fullest, exploit your potential to the maximum if you don't have a positive mental health, if you're not
Oh,
healthy
nope,
mentally. So I feel
nope.
like this is so important for everyone. Prioritize your mental health because when you're mentally healthy, you would have all of the tools, the support, the capacity you need to create as much wealth as you want.
Amen. Absolutely.
So, David, how can people reach out to you? How can they connect with you?
So you can email me if you'd like, David at David Woods, it's my middle name, davidwoodsbartley.com. So David at davidwoodsbartley.com. Website is davidwoodsbartley.com. My beloved niece and I are redoing it right now. And feel free to call me. I always give my number out. No one ever calls me.
Really?
They swear no one ever calls me. I'd like, seriously, I'm happy to talk if you would like to call me. 916
Yeah.
247 6389. So I'd love to come to organizations and speak, any kind of groups. I do a lot of work with kids, military, anybody who it's just about putting a deeper helping people understand mental illness, create a pathway to mental health, and be equipped with these 3 tools to create a space for people that they might reconsider taking their life.
Yes. Can you read your mobile number again, please?
Absolutely. 916
Yeah.
247 6389.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Thank
it's
you so
been
much. Thanks for having me.
it's
My God, this
been
has
a
been
joy and a
incredible.
privilege talking to you. I
I
needed
love
this
this.
episode for sure. Thank you so much for
You're
coming on
so,
show.
thank you, Joy.
Hey, very quickly before you go, if this podcast inspired or encouraged you in any way, please leave us a review on Apple Podcasts and share this with a friend. It means a lot to us, and we appreciate your kindness and generosity in doing this. We'll see you back here on the next episode. Bye bye.